question, as Mary Alice said earlier, was how does voice-driven audio advertising differ from other audio advertising formats? And obviously, we are entering into very uncharted territory here. This is something that people are just starting to open up. Pandora or Spotify is currently doing voice advertising, I think. Well, yeah. And so, this is kind of, we can do whatever we want to in this area as we make up the rules. One of the things I think that we will be able to do using voice assistants is capitalize on the voice searches that people are making with those devices. So we'll be able to serve up content that is completely relevant to what they're looking for and allow them to continue further down the path into perhaps making a purchase or choosing a service that they continue to use. I think, we're also able to use the information that we have that we're gathering about those customers on the devices and the additional skills and activities that they've linked to their profiles to be able to deliver to them more relevant content. And one of the things that we do at Novel Effect that's a little bit different is we open up the audio listening into longer formats. And so something I think that may be really interesting that we can do there is in-person live activations using voice, where we're able to kind of bring someone into a holistic experience that doesn't necessarily feel like advertising and feels like something that's more fun and more engaging. And I think that a lot of it is going to depend on how creative we can get as developers and as content producers. And I think that, there's a lot of opportunity that exists that we really can take advantage of.
Thank you. I'm trying to understand the audience here. How many of you represent a brand and are involved with the audio or some form of advertising? Please raise your hands. Quite a few of you. How many of you are coming from the technology side of things? Quite a few of you. Okay, I'll try to cater to both audiences. If I have to compare a voice-driven advertising to an audio ad, I could compare it with one word, and that's engagement. Voice brings engagement to the table. Let me elaborate on that. Steve might know that the old radio ads, they were just, you record something, it's a branding statement, recorded maybe a couple of months ago, play it over the air, and it keeps repeating. Right? So that's branding, that's an audio ad. However, we can compare that to even print ads, right? I mean, you print something in a magazine, the copy gets written like maybe a couple of months before the magazine goes to the press, and then there goes the magazine. So you can share your branding message, but you cannot get engagement out of it. That whole market was disrupted by digital advertising, where you can click, you can go to the website, there's some level of engagement. And we're trying to do the same thing with voice-based advertising to audio advertising. Of course, on Pandora, you can click on an audio ad, you can go to the website, but click offers some level of engagement, not the same as a voice engagement. Voice is a lot richer. Click is a binary, click or no click. Voice is you can say something, it means something, there's a tone, there's an intonation, there's sentiment, you can capture all of that. And brands probably benefit significantly from something like that. So the difference between a plain branding message versus a branding message with potential for engagement is the big difference between an audio ad and a voice-driven advertisement, or what we call voice ads. Let's talk about why engagement is important. Back in the day, I'm gonna take a very old example. The size of radio and print businesses were fairly equal. And you know what else was as big as radio and print business? The Yellow Pages and direct mail. Can you imagine that? I mean, this book that comes to your house once a year, and these mailers that come in a big mailbox, they were the same size industry as, let's say, radio industry. Why is that? And that's one word answer again, engagement. And we all know the story of what digital advertisements did, with the click engagement, right? So we are hoping that with the voice ads, we can bring similar level of engagement and richer engagement and elevate the whole world of audio advertising so that brands can not only communicate the message, but have a dialogue with their users. I know this is a big promise. We are not there yet. We are not even close to that point at this point. We are very, very, very early. We are in the exploratory stage of the business, and there will be multiple iterations before we can get to some concrete formats that are scalable. At this point, we are all in exploratory phase.
All right, so let's see, my question is, what are the greatest challenges ahead? So, first of all, I think every ad platform, every ad form is different on each platform. And I don't think we know exactly where this is going to end up. I think interactivity is really hard. I don't know about you, but I'm not really interested in a relationship with Coca-Cola. If they want to give me a coupon, that's great, but I'm not sure it goes beyond that. So I think to step up to this engagement notion is really hard. That doesn't mean that there aren't brands that won't be able to defy that and do well with that, but I don't think it's an automatic that everybody's interested in your ad. I do think that there are tremendous opportunities to be distinguished on these devices. A lot of those may be baked in ads. It's hard when you're living inside the Google and Amazon environment to go below that, in other words, to code to the individual respondent. And by the way, we've all learned the lessons of Facebook renting the platform, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So whatever their rules are the rules that we must adhere to. And so, for example, on Amazon, you can't run an ad. You can sponsor something, you can run your own skill and do something within the skill, but you have to drive people to the skill. I think that there's a lot of tricky steps there. And yeah, maybe I'm the glass half empty guy, but I just think we're in that experimental phase where people are trying stuff, and there's some great noble experiments going on, but I don't think it'll ever be one size fits all. And I don't know where the Amazon, Google people will take us, but I'm pretty sure their rules will change over time.
So a little bit about the evolution of voice-enabled, voice-activated, voice dialogue ads. We actually started rolling out pilot campaigns in the fourth quarter of last year, mostly in Eastern Europe, and for companies like Volkswagen, IKEA, HP, Samsung, Infinity, Bank of America, Visa, etc. And so we had time to study a little bit of the behaviors that go along with these campaigns. One of the things that differentiates a voice ad from an audio ad, typically and historically, is that we can measure them now. So voice is kind of Click 2.0 for the first time. We can measure audio campaign performance in real time with empirical data that we make available to agencies and brands so they can optimize campaigns while they're on the fly, dynamically, and not with an attribution study afterwards or a brand lift study, but something that occurs while the campaign is running. But we've learned a lot in a short period of time. We have a lot more to learn, obviously, but what we've seen from the campaigns early on was that we were achieving, in places, when we placed ads on platforms that had never heard one of these ads before, ever in their life, we were achieving 10 to 15% engagement rates, which even shocked us. And those rates, I think, were because it's a dialogue, not a monologue. A traditional audio ad speaks one way to the audience, as a talk at the audience kind of thing. I'm not picking on audio, I come from that background, but when you have an engaged consumer who you're having a dialogue with, that changes everything. It's a game changer from the marketer's perspective. One of the things that we're learning, and that we've learned and seen others do research on, is that It's pretty obvious, most marketers look at this when we talk about it and say, yeah, I see that an engaged audience is gonna more likely enter the purchase funnel of the advertiser. No doubt about that. Being able to measure this in real time, wildly valuable, we get that. But what's not quite so obvious is that when a person says something out loud, there's a different dynamic. When you say, I'm interested in that new Tesla, we tend to align our actions with what we say out loud. So I don't know if any of you have read the book by Cialdini, but it's called The Psychology of Persuasion. And one of the things they did was an interesting study on how saying something out loud impacts upon our behaviors. And so what they did was they sent a guy to the beach with a radio and a towel, and they said, hey, plunk that down next to a group of people, and look over at them, but don't say a word, just get up and walk down the beach to the bathroom, and while you're gone, they send in a fake thief to steal the radio. In all cases, the average number was like 20%, I think, of people reacting. So then they said, okay, let's set it up again. This time, put the towel down by these other people and put the radio on the towel and look over at them, but this time say, would you watch my things while I go to the bathroom? Some guy says, sure dude, go for it. Somebody goes back down the beach to the bathroom, they send in the fake thief, and now 95% of people reacted. What was the only difference? That somebody said out loud, I'll watch your things. Meaning they said it came from here, they meant it. So think of the implications to the marketer. What is the likelihood of that person who said out loud, I'm interested in that new Tesla, entering the purchase funnel very deeply of that marketer? It's not clear.
I'm not sure what you want me to do.
Sorry.
Jubilee.
We're trying to figure out which one's number 5.
Yeah.
So what are the greatest challenges ahead for voice-driven audio advertising?
I thought I did that one. I can go back around. I still feel that way.
Steve said something which is very, very insightful. That is, not everybody wants to engage with all brands, which is perfect. But even the notion of, here's a target segment that does not want to engage with a brand, and this is a segment that is neutral, and this is a third segment that's very positive. Getting that data to the brand's hands is powerful, right? Now I know you don't like Coke, right? I'm not gonna offer that to you. I'll offer you coffee, right? Having said that, the second point you mentioned was there's no standardization for voice ads, right? And then that's going to be a deal killer if we ever come up with like 10 different formats, there's no scale, not enough inventory, so not enough reach, right? So, excuse me, so the format is not going to go anywhere. However, that's something that we at Pandora are working at. We are working with multiple players in the industry to standardize voice advertising. And we have been involving them in experiments, we are involving them in all sorts of brand studies, so that eventually when we do have a large format, everybody says the same thing, speaks the same language, and it's all electronically transacted through a vast document, right? So the technology people in the room are probably excited by me mentioning VAST, because that's the whole level of standardization where you can throw voice ads at a real-time system and it will just flow through the system as well.
One of the advantages that you have is iteration, and you're able to A/B everything that you do, which is enviable, and you're also able to localize it and regionalize it. And those are skills and attributes that are very valuable for somebody on the listening end to make something more relevant, which may not be interactive, but it will increase the relevance and therefore the CPM, the importance, and maybe some action that can be taken.
So it kind of brings up an interesting conundrum that kind of goes back to the very beginnings of advertising. When you think about this, Madison has always been on this idea of reach and frequency, and a frequency of 3 or 4 or 5, and how do you drive a consumer to taking action? How many times do you repeat a message? So we've been throwing ads at people for a long time, irritating them at levels that we've always assumed that this amount of frequency would drive the action or the awareness levels or top of mind that we're trying to achieve. One of the things that this is going to change forever, is that we can already, and in the coming months or within less than a year, our ads will be multiple layers like branching logic, instead of just being, hi, Starbucks here, would you like your coffee waiting for you when you arrive? And then we open the microphone and you say, Starbucks sucks, we go, okay, we think that means no, so we'll try harder later, we go back to content. But now we'll be able to offer continuous dialogue in the coming near-term future, meaning that if we're having a conversation between a brand and a consumer, and we're in the middle of that conversation like, hey, we hear you like ice cream, and you say, I do. Say, well, what do you like better, chocolate, vanilla, or strawberry? And you say vanilla, and then we say, well, we've got 3 flavors of vanilla, French, blah, 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 which would you like? And then we deliver a landing page or a whatever, a video or whatever to that person. That really changes everything because it's a continuous dialogue, and it can actually be picked up on another day. Because it was on our server, we're able to say, hey, we know you like chocolate ice cream, you told us that the other day. And suddenly we're having a deeper conversation with you, and we don't have to rely on that same pounding, the same high-frequency, irritating ad into your life. So, game changer for marketing.
Nice blue dress you're wearing, Stacy.
That's true.
Okay, so we're gonna kind of flip a little bit, and we're gonna talk about how to prepare to be in voice-driven audio advertising. My background before voice was consumer packaged goods. So I worked for companies like Procter & Gamble, General Mills, Mattel Toys, and so we bought a lot of advertising and we advertised on all platforms. So if I was sitting in that chair today, I would be facing a decision, do I want to spend my money on voice-driven audio advertising or not? And so I was just gonna take through some things that maybe I would think about, that maybe agencies think about, and then people who are selling are thinking about. But at the end of the day, to get this whole thing started, you have to have the commitment of the people with the budget and the strategy in order to reach out to ultimately our voice first customers. So a few thoughts that I would share. I'm a big proponent of working backwards. So start with your customer. Not every brand should be doing voice advertising at this time. We don't really talk about that a lot, but if you have, some kind of a sound, I think of the PlayStation, that at the end of the PlayStation ads, I mean, they have sonic branding, and people would recognize it without even having any other stimulus. Just close your eyes and listen. If you heard that sound, you'd go PlayStation. People can also do that in terms of sayings or songs or sounds, whatever it is. If you have that, yes, you should be doing this. I mean, that is the answer. If you don't have this though, I always suggest that you go and remember what people know your brand for. And then start asking yourself a bunch of questions. Does this further my brand? Is this the story I want to tell? Is this the creative that will create another touch point that people are gonna remember and engage with my brand? And a lot of people I see at Voice aren't doing that. They aren't asking themselves the question before they run off to the races to make a skill or an action, etc. And I think that if we go back to some old school marketing and with some agencies' help, we can get there very quickly. But again, I think every brand deserves to go down that path to ask those questions to begin with. Second thing is your audience. I'm going to use an example. I have not worked on this brand, but I follow it because I find it to just be fascinating. Everybody knows the car brand Subaru. Have you ever noticed how much marketing they do with pets? Like they have pets driving a car right now. The reason why is a few years back, they actually looked at their brand and went back to fundamentals of their audience and realized that almost every one of their core consumers is a pet owner. So they made that kind of the underlying creative and strategic analytical foundation of all their marketing. And that's fascinating to me because what they did is they made a brand fall in love with them because they're pet owners by showing pets. Wow, isn't that great marketing? But it's so strange because it has nothing to do with the car, right? Well, truth is, it does have something to do with the car because the way their cars are built are very pet friendly, and also they allow a lot of gear to go in the car if you have a pet. So that's why they kind of connected with this. Now, the purpose of this story is just to share, they found an insight inside of their brand, and then that allows you to ask the question, if I was to do this in my marketing, would it help my ultimate customer, the person I want to buy stuff, to remember my brand, and would it further a touch point along that path? So I'm a big fan of working backwards, so I think even before I said the word voice, that's something that I think people need to spend some time doing. Then I think there are a couple of questions when you move forward and you start talking about voice. And it is how much or how should you express your brand in this medium, and the team here has talked a little bit about it. It's a moving target because what you can do today is going to be very different than what you can do tomorrow. My recommendation is if it lines up with your brand and your audience, carve out 5% of your budget and do something. Carve out 5% of your budget and do something. And the reason why is probably that's gonna fly enough on the radar that nobody's gonna really call you on why you didn't get a good ROI yesterday. But the other reason is because it's gonna start allowing you to understand how fast the industry is moving, and you can be a part of the conversation. And I think that's really important right now. And related to that, then you get to the question buy or build. Very classic business question. Do you buy it or do you build it? You can now today hire people who make skills or have people inside make those skills, but you can also find people here at Voice who will do it for you in very quick time and do it at very high quality, and that will help you experiment with what this means to your brand. So I urge you to be fast and simple to get started and start learning. That's, I think, really what's important. And then the last thing I'm intrigued by is you mentioned radio. Earplay is a startup, and the founder's inspiration is old-time radio. So kind of like the drama, radio drama format. That's how Earplay got started 6 years ago. But it's really interesting because what was the way advertising worked in that era? It was sponsorship. It wasn't even an ad. It was, brought to you by, no selling points, no new product launch, nothing like that. It was just old-fashioned sponsorship, and you could buy sponsorship today. You could buy sponsorship of a story that tells a story about your brand today. You could buy an ad in certain formats with the help of others and put an ad out tomorrow, maybe not today. But you see what I'm saying is I think that there are a lot of decisions that you can explore if you are thinking about advertising. But don't forget about the strategy, don't forget about the creative, don't forget about your audience. Because you shouldn't be doing it if you can't answer those questions.
I think one other thing that we can take into consideration here is, I know many of us, we're developing content for the voice assistants, but that's not, it is limiting in what we're able to do because we have to follow their rules, but those aren't the only avenues that we have to reach consumers through voice. There are web voice, browsers are voice enabled, mobile can be voice enabled, and we can reach people through these platforms and set our own rules, rather than having to abide by the access that a giant like Amazon or Google is going to give us in gathering information, digesting it, and then providing relevant and engaging ads to people. Oh, sorry.
That was a very good point about ecosystems and their roles, right? So right now, advertising on both Google and Amazon platforms is very restricted because they're both probably after market share. However, as you said, there are other avenues, other platforms, other areas where you can try voice advertising. For instance, voice advertising is very new. If you go after ROI, it's probably not the right medium for you. However, there's a place for exploration and there's a place for scaling and getting the ROI, right? Voice isn't currently in the place for exploration. So as Mary pointed out, you may want to get a small portion of your budget to explore how voice advertising works, what doesn't, what fits your brand. And then once you have that data, a year from now, you will be in a better place to scale when your competition is also doing voice-based initiatives, right? So then you'll not be going in blind. You'll have data to talk about, hey, this is the direction I want to go, and these are two directions that do not work for my brand or my category.
I'm curious, how many of you have built a skill and are trying to drive traffic to that skill? And in general, I know, tough question, how is that going? It's hard, isn't it? It's hard to be found, it's hard to drive traffic, and I don't see numbers published often, but the last I saw was that the retention rates on skills are 90% of them aren't retaining audience, assuming you've garnered an audience to begin with. So that there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the ecosystem all the way around. But going back to the sort of the mainstreaming of these messages, you need a place to start to drive that audience to your skill, and that's an equally hard part of the equation. So getting them interested in it, getting them over there, and then delighting them with something when they get there. And these are all hard elements, I think, within the whole marketing funnel in voice.
So I think continuing on that same line, I think when you think about a voice-enabled ad and what opportunity that might represent, I don't think we mentioned earlier that voice-enabled ads are deliverable or delivered to iOS and Android devices because there has to be microphone access. So to those of you on the tech side, obviously we have to install technology on the mobile platform side and can deliver only to iOS, Android native apps, as well as Android web browsers because of the microphone issue. Yes, you can get microphone access to a web browser, but it isn't nearly as easy as these were made for. So that's number one, but that does open up an opportunity when you talk about cross-selling ads for driving people to a skill. That may be something that you're using on a smart speaker, and we're not delivering voice-enabled ads to smart speakers right now because Amazon, Google, and Apple don't allow it. It's not because we can't do it technically, but probably a great advertising opportunity if you're on the brand side or the agency side to do exactly what you talked about. Because when you get into a dialogue with somebody in the creative, you can drive the emotional attachment to that and the need for that skill in a way that a one-way monologue audio ad would probably never be able to do. So, something to think about too.
Anybody have anything we can open it up for questions? Good with the panel? Yep. Anybody have any questions?